I keep hearing from startup founders and CTOs that cloud is just expensive. Those 5K, 10K, and even 25K of monthly bill is normal when they're scaling. But here's the thing, you're not paying for scale, you're paying for bad engineering and insufficient governance. Your cloud doesn't cost 5x more because you're growing fast, it costs 5x more because nobody told you that cloud isn't cheaper by default. It only becomes efficient when it's actively engineered, not just consumed. My name is Mike, I'm the COO at Atomic Computing, and over the past 5 years, we've successfully saved millions of dollars for over 300 companies across North America, Europe, the Middle East, and in Africa by constantly finding and fixing the same architectural disasters, simply by helping them identify their architectural mistakes and offer end-to-end solutions to be more secure, more scalable, more cost-effective for their cloud infrastructure. Most businesses treat their cloud bill like a rental data center instead of an engineered platform, and that's exactly why their bill keeps exploding. In the next few minutes, I'll show you the 3 engineering mistakes that are bleeding your company dry and the specific fixes that cut costs by 40 to 70% while actually improving performance, reliability, and even making it easier to maintain your workloads altogether. See, most companies are burning thousands of dollars every single month on computing power and storage that's literally doing nothing. When businesses migrate to the cloud, they often take their old infrastructure design and simply recreate it in AWS, Microsoft Azure, or Google Cloud. But the cloud isn't meant to be used like traditional infrastructure, and that's where the waste starts. You see things like servers running 24/7 even though they're only needed during business hours, database provision for Black Friday traffic every single day, development environments that cost the same as production and even though they're used maybe 10% of the time, and storage buckets that slowly accumulate data for months or years with no cleanup policies being in place. The result? Your cloud bill keeps growing, and even though your actual usage hasn't changed much, the first fix is systematically identifying and cleaning up unused resources and then right-sizing what you actually need based on real usage data. And when companies do this properly, they can usually cut 20 to 40% of their cloud bill almost immediately because they're simply turning off what they weren't using anyway. See, the good part about the cloud is that you pay only for what you use. But the bad part is that you also pay for everything that you forgot to turn off. Cloud becomes cost-effective when you engineer infrastructure around real usage patterns, not when you treat it like a data center that happens to live somewhere else. The companies that get this right understand that cloud infrastructure should be dynamic, responsive, and intelligent, not just a more expensive copy of their old setup. One of our recent projects was with RTL, one of the largest TV and media companies headquartered in Germany, and one of their subsidiaries was spending over $250,000 per year on cloud infrastructure. When we looked at their environment, we discovered something pretty common. They had terabytes of historical media data sitting in their S3 storage buckets that had accumulated over decades, and most of it was rarely accessed. Our team implemented custom lifecycle policies for their backup and storage. We also introduced tiered archiving, automatically moving older media assets into lower cost storage tiers. And at the same time, we identified several wasteful Kubernetes cluster resources that were no longer needed. The result of that exercise, in just 4 weeks of our engagement, we reduced their infrastructure costs by over 50% annually. That's a 25% cost reduction simply by aligning their infrastructure with their actual usage patterns. Now here's the part that shocks most CTOs that we're talking to. The time your engineering team spends manually trying to optimize infrastructure problems is often more expensive than simply designing the architecture correctly in the first place. Engineering teams spend weeks trying to figure out why their APIs are timing out, why their database connections are maxing out, or their service is collapsing under traffic spikes. But the real issue usually isn't the code, it's the architecture. Things like missing autoscaling policies, poor connection management, or workloads that were never designed for cloud-native infrastructure deployment in the first place. And this is the part of total cost of ownership that most organizations completely overlook. You're paying some of your most expensive engineers to constantly fight infrastructure fires instead of building features that move your business forward. Think about it. If your lead engineer spends 20 hours every single month dealing with infrastructure issues, that's easily $1,500 or more just in salary costs to firefight. And that doesn't even include include any of the opportunity costs. No features being built, no bugs being fixed, technical debts quietly growing in the background, and in many startups, infrastructure incidents end up pulling the entire engineering team into emergency mode every single week. Not because scaling is impossible, but because nobody designed the infrastructure to scale properly in the first place. The second fix is re-architecture and modernization of your cloud environment. That means rebuilding workloads using modern cloud-native patterns, implementing proper monitoring and alerting, setting up auto-scaling policies, and designing systems to be resilient from the start. When you do that, something interesting happens. Infrastructure stops being a constant source of stress. Your systems become predictable, it becomes self-healing, and your engineering team finally has the freedom to focus on building the product instead of maintaining infrastructure. A good example of this comes from the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. They had a C++ application running on internal servers that handled complex bioinformatics computation workloads. Their team decided to modernize the system, and we helped them to transform their application and infrastructure into a container-based architecture, and the infrastructure was rebuilt around modern cloud patterns. That allowed them to run batch processing workloads only when needed, instead of maintaining always running infrastructure. The result of that was a significant reduction in total cost of ownership. But more importantly, their team could finally focus on work that actually mattered, advancing their research instead of constantly maintaining infrastructure. And over the past few years, their team has only needed to reach out to us a handful of times, rather than dealing with infrastructure issues every single week. And that's the real difference between reactive infrastructure and engineered infrastructure management. Now, this third mistake is one of the most surprising ones. Many companies are paying full price for the same cloud infrastructure when they could be getting a 30 to 60% discount on the exact same resources. The two mechanisms most organizations completely overlook are reservations and cloud credit programs. Let's start with the reservation first. By default, cloud providers charge you hourly pricing, which is actually the most expensive pricing model there is. But if you commit to using certain resources for up to 3 years, providers offer massive discounts. We're talking 30 to 60% off the exact same servers, databases, and infrastructure. A lot of companies avoid reservations because they think it locks them in, or they're unsure about their future usage. But once you've cleaned up unused resources and modernized your architecture, you actually have a very stable baseline of what your infrastructure needs look like. And that baseline rarely changes dramatically month to month, which means you can safely reserve that capacity and cut a huge portion of your costs immediately. Then there's the second opportunity, which is cloud credits. Cloud providers run startup programs, partnership programs, and migration programs that can provide tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in free infrastructure credits. But most companies simply don't know these programs even exist. So they keep paying full price, even though they could be running part of their infrastructure essentially for free. The difference between a $20,000 average monthly bill and a $6,000 average monthly bill often comes down to these two strategies alone. Same infrastructure, same performance, but dramatically different cost, because the company actually understands how cloud pricing works. And when you combine cleaned up resources, modern architecture, strategic reservations, and maximized credit programs, you often see 40 to 70% total cost reductions in your environment without sacrificing performance. In fact, most of the time, performance actually improves. So one of the customers that we are working with is Petra, a manufacturing company in North America who are spending roughly $300,000 per year on infrastructure, running a large Microsoft environment in a co-location data center. We performed something that we call the Optimization and Licensing Assessment, or in short, OLA or OLA. This helped determine the right instance types, perform a full right-sizing exercise, and identify Microsoft licenses that were no longer required after modernizing parts of their infrastructure. But bigger opportunities came from cloud migration incentives. They became eligible for hundreds of thousands of dollars in cloud credits through the Migration Acceleration Program. These credits are now helping support their cloud transformation over the next 3 years, with significantly reducing their infrastructure costs. And more importantly, it gives their leadership team a much stronger business case for modernization. If your cloud bill feels like a mysterious expense that keeps growing month over month, it's usually not because the cloud is expensive. It's because the cloud hasn't been properly engineered yet. When you treat cloud like a rental data center, costs usually explode. But when you treat it like an engineered platform, something interesting happens. Costs go down, performance goes up, reliability improves, and your engineers can finally focus on building the product instead of fighting infrastructure misconfiguration issues. The companies that win with the cloud aren't the ones that spend the most. They're the ones engineering it to the best. And if you want to learn more about how you can migrate, modernize, and optimize your application workloads and infrastructure, I will leave my calendar link down below so you can go ahead and book a meeting with me or someone from my team, and we will run a free technical assessment workshop where we look at your environment and identify opportunities to improve costs, performance, security posture, and reliability in your cloud infrastructure. And if you're running your workloads on the cloud as of today already, there's a very good chance you are leaving a lot of efficiency and money on the table. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.